Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Trites-Raleigh, and I will be presenting today for the Livestock Gross Margin for Dairy Cattle and Swine in Pennsylvania webinar. Our presentation today is part of a grant with the USDA for the state of Pennsylvania. A little bit about me as we begin today. I am the Vice President of Policy and Data Quality for National Crop Insurance Services. National Crop Insurance Services is the trade association for the crop insurance industry. I am a reviewer, interpreter, and subject matter expert for federal and crop hail data processing and policy to ensure that policy and procedure are accurately implemented. I also review and comment on draft policy and procedure, actuarial and processing documentation, and am a member of Farm Bill and expert review teams. I'm also the Technology and Information Processing Committee liaison, and I participate in industry and member training and education. I started working in crop insurance part-time in 1994 at a small regional company, eventually working through 4 different private companies in almost every aspect of the industry, underwriting, claims, analysis, you name it. I joined NCIS in 2013 with an IT and data processing and systems focus before moving into my current role. Additionally, I am the Precision Ag Council Chair for Ag Gateway and the Communications Working Group Chair at Ag Gateway, and I participate in the Women in Agribusiness. Helping farmers keep farming and supporting farmers' service providers is really a key item for me and part of why I stay in crop insurance. It keeps me connected to my rural Minnesota farm kid roots, and I love the variety. In a single day, I can work with federal government on procedure, policy, private industry on rating and data processing, associations on data exchange standards, and colleagues on training, audits, and web content. Now, someday I do hope to bake and decorate custom cookies for money, supporting our farmers through my baking supply purchases. But until then, I bake and decorate for holidays and share the edible love through the mail and during meetings. Now let's jump in to our presentation today. Livestock gross margin for dairy cattle and swine in Pennsylvania. Our focus is to review the federal crop insurance structure briefly, to also go through the LGM basic provision tenets and choices for insuring dairy cattle or swine under LGM, and to discuss duties when a loss occurs. We'll also go through a few calculations. So let's talk about the relationship that we need to work within for the federal crop insurance program. Working together, we start with the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, and their role is to establish new and revised commodity crop insurance programs, policy provisions, rules, and regulations. Next, we go to the Risk Management Agency. Risk Management Agency manages the FCIC and oversees the crop insurance program, administers actuarial data and premium discounts, and provides support and outreach. The approved insurance provider is your crop insurance company. And throughout this webinar, I might refer to them as the AIP, as an insurance provider, as the crop insurance company. It's all the same entity. They are the ones underwriting and adjusting and issuing indemnities for your crop insurance policy. The agent. Your agent is your key contact. They provide product and premium information to you. They collect any required information on approved forms. They build relationships with you to help you best protect your operation, and they need to stay current with crop insurance programs and procedures, and they receive a policy commission from the insurance provider to do the work that is necessary to help you best protect your operation. And then there's you. You, as the farmer, are the key. You have the ownership in the crop. You enter into a contract to insure that crop. You report required information. You pay any applicable premiums and fees. You follow appropriate practices. You notify companies in the event of a loss or turn in documentation, as we'll talk about today, when that is due in order to confirm a loss. And you receive an indemnity payment when an insurance loss occurs if the guarantee is not met. You are the key. You are the reason we're all here today. So how would you buy a policy? If you do not yet have an agent, that's a key part of the crop insurance puzzle. So I would encourage you to take a look at the Find an Agent Locator portion of the Risk Management Agency's website. The information is on the slide here. Also, this will take you to that information. You see here that there is an option to choose livestock, which is what we're talking about today, if you wish to narrow down your search a little bit further. Few little stats to look at how these livestock programs have been purchased within the last year in the state of Pennsylvania. First, LGM dairy cattle, which I'll frequently call dairy or LGM dairy. Please note that there is a webinar that was recorded just this morning concerning the Dairy Revenue Protection Program. That's a good complement to this presentation. Today, dairy means the LGM Dairy Cattle Program. In 2018, LGM Dairy sold 65 policies in Pennsylvania for a little about $10.5 million of liability, 174,780 hundredweight of milk, so quite a bit of milk. Total premium of a little over 193,000, and indemnities paid of 91,370. Now, the number of policies that actually earned premium, in other words, people who bothered to report and attach coverage, were only 15. 8 policies were indemnified, and our loss ratio is 47% with these stats. LGM Swine only had 1 policy sold in the state of Pennsylvania. So if you're a swine producer, you may want to take a look at this program. There is room for you. If you notice the statistics, though, this one producer did insure a fair number of head of swine and was able to rather well protect themselves, regaining some of their losses through an indemnity payment. Let's go through an overview and the application process for livestock gross margin. Our first step is to go through a few key sales-related definitions. The insurance period is an 11-month for dairy or 6-month for swine period that's designated in on the summary of insurance as to which the policy is applicable. The commodity exchange endorsement for each commodity provides a significant amount of detail about the insurance period. Now, the insurance period being 11 months or 6 months long, that first month of either of those is a quote-unquote no coverage or waiting period month where you do not designate any coverage for that month. You'll only designate head to be sold for swine or milk to be marketed for dairy in the second month through the final month. The sales closing date is the date by which your completed application or target marketing, so we'll talk about that later, is received by your company. Also, the last date by which you can change your insurance coverage for a given insurance period. And it's a real short window. The sales period gives you an idea of just how brief that window is. It's the time that begins on the last business Friday of the month after validation of prices and rates and ends at 8 p.m. Central Time the following day. So a very brief window, starts on a Friday, ends 8 p.m. Central on Saturday evening. And these are once per month. We'll show a chart in a couple of slides. Share is also a consideration for making a purchase. The share for LGM is the lesser of your percentage interest in the insured milk or swine as an owner at the time insurance attaches and at the time of sale of that milk or swine. People who lease or hold some other interest in the milk or swine other than as an owner are not considered to have a share in the milk or swine for LGM policy purposes. LGM policies are insured at 100% share. So now that we've filled you full of a few definitions and stats, let's back up. What exactly is livestock gross margin insurance? Great question. First, geographical. It is available in every county in all contiguous 48 United States. Only ones that are left out are Alaska and Hawaii currently. LGM is a product that provides protection against loss of market value, which is your gross margin of the end product, your milk or your swine, minus feed cost, which are your inputs. And the LGM policy uses corn and soybean meal. So essentially, we're covering what you might make as revenue minus what you have to put into that animal in order to get the output product. This is a continuous policy. As I mentioned previously, it has 12 available overlapping insurance periods per year. You can purchase one or more insurance period and insure your milk production or head of swine for slaughter in one or more coverage months within that insurance period. You just can't insure the same hog twice or the same hundredweight of milk twice. Your target marketings, which is the amount you're targeting to sell in a given month in your coverage period, must be submitted for each insurance period in which you want coverage. Makes sense. If a target marketings report is not submitted by the sales closing date, then you have no target marketings for that period. Let's talk a little bit specifically about what is livestock gross margin insurance for dairy cattle. That coverage is specifically providing protection when feed costs rise or milk costs drop. It can be tailored to fit any size farm. The gross margin is the market value of milk minus your feed cost. LGM Dairy uses futures prices for corn, for soybean meal, and for Class 3 milk to determine the expected gross margin or expected amount you are covering, and the actual gross margin or the amount at the end using ending prices. LGM Dairy is somewhat similar to buying both a call option to limit the higher feed costs and a put option to set a floor on your milk or in the case of swine, on lean hog prices. This insurance really, though, is not a true option. So in that case, if you are used to buying into futures markets, doing puts and calls, this is an insurance product and cannot be exercised like a true option. Also for LGM dairy, only milk sold for commercial or private sale, primarily intended for final human consumption from dairy cattle, not another livestock that could be milked, such as goats, sheep. That is not what's covered. It is dairy cattle only, fed in the United States. That is what is eligible for coverage. There is no minimum or maximum number of hundredweight of milk that you can insure. So you're not held to having to insure everything that you produce, and you're not limited to a maximum amount that you can insure of the amount you produce. Prices for LGM dairy are based on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group Futures Daily Contract Settlement prices. As I mentioned just a moment ago, that's your Class 3 milk, soybean meal, and corn futures. There is a possibility under LGM dairy that you could receive a premium discount amount if you insure in more than 1 month of an insurance period. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Your premium discounts are a specific set of ranges that are released in the actuarial documents and included in the policy documents as well. For swine, a few important points. That coverage is protecting against the loss of gross margin. Again, very similar to dairy, but here we're looking at your livestock minus your feed costs. So for your swine, that's going to use prices based on a simple average of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group futures contract daily settlements. Again, very similar to LGM dairy. Here you're looking at the lean hog price versus corn and soybean meal prices. The price you receive at local market or the price that you might receive through a contract is not considered in either LGM program. There is no premium discount available for LGM swine in the current policy. So what are some of the advantages? Well, just in case you didn't notice with our previous description, and we'll get into the details in a few slides, LGM really does offer some convenience. It's going to give you an opportunity for you as a farmer to sign up for LGM 12 different times per year and ensure all the milk production or head of swine that you expect to market as an owner over the rolling 11 or 6-month insurance period. You don't have to decide on the mix of options to purchase, the strike price of options, or the date of entry. You're buying an insurance policy, and the work of the markets happens behind the scenes in the determinations of prices. Also, there's customization. The LGM policy can be tailored to any size of farm. So say, for example, you might be using contract pricing, you might be purchasing puts, calls, buying futures contracts. That's fine, but perhaps you would like to also have an insurance policy. You can supplement with this product or go in full with this product. We'll also talk at the end of our time today about how this product works with some others that are available through the USDA. Also under customization, the options cover fixed amounts of commodities, and those amounts might be too large for you, for your farm. So that's also a reason to look at this as a better fit for your risk management portfolio. It may better fit if you're a farmer who has a smaller operation or a side portion of your operation is livestock or dairy rather than the whole thing. Also, LGM is a bundled option. Well, what do we mean by that? Simply that for LGM dairy, it's a bundle that covers both the price of milk and your feed costs. So it's got a mix of target milk marketings, target feed rations that are supplied by you as the producer. And this feature lets you select the feed rations and production levels that best reflect your actual productivity in a given month during a particular insurance period. And the result of this bundled option ensures your gross margin, your milk revenue minus feed cost, over an insurance period. So it's very tailored to you, not something that is out there for anyone to purchase. Similar for LGM swine, a bundled option that's going to cover the price of hogs and feed costs and is specified to your gross margin during any particular month over the insurance period. So that all sounds great, right? But what doesn't it cover? Well, as we've mentioned, this is only going to cover the difference between your actual gross margin, what you produce for sale, and your gross margin guarantee, what you said you'd produce, which is the amount you insured, and it's only due to unavoidable occurrences. It's not going to cover death, disease, physical damage, destruction, lack of available feed, or an unexpected increase in feed use in order to produce your output. For dairy, it doesn't cover a decline in milk production. It won't cover changes in markets, local market price differences. It won't cover anything that you're anticipating for multi-year declines in milk or hog prices, or that you're anticipating for multi-year increases in your feed cost. That is not part of this policy. Let's talk about our two crops. Now, insured dairy cattle is dairy cattle that produces milk in the 48 contiguous United States, primarily for commercial or private sale and primarily intended for human consumption. It is insured at 100% share, and the insured commodity is dairy cattle. However, the output that is priced as the revenue stream here for gross margin is your milk production in hundredweight. So let's talk about what is milk in a definition under this policy. Milk is milk produced from any species of domesticated mammal in the family Bovidae, commonly grown for production of dairy products, also referred to as dairy cows. Insured dairy cattle is also under this umbrella program going to consider the futures market prices of milk under Class 3 prices and the amount of corn or soybean meal or equivalents. And we'll get into what we mean by equivalents in a few slides. So that's our insured dairy cattle, with the output of milk being our revenue stream. Insured swine, also insured at 100% share, is swine that's sold for commercial or private slaughter, primarily intended for human consumption. These are swine that are fed out to slaughter size in the 48 contiguous United States, and they're raised in one of 3 different types of operation. So these operations are farrow to finish. That operation type in the policy is defined as a farm operation that covers all aspects of breeding, farrowing, and raising swine to slaughter. You could insure under a type of feeder pig finishing. That operation type is a farm operation that specializes in feeding of swine, feeder pigs, from a weight of approximately 50 pounds up to slaughter weight. Or an operation type of segregated early weaned or SEW pig finishing operation. And that type is a farm operation that specializes in the feeding of swine from an age of approximately 12 to 21 days up to slaughter. As with dairy, and as we've touched on previously, we are considering futures market prices for our swine under the lean hogs futures and an amount of corn and an amount of soybean meal or an equivalent that's fed to the swine to raise them up to marketing weight. The assumed weight at marketing for this program is 260 pounds, and that's always going to be expressed in our policy and in our calculations as 2.6 hundredweight. Let's next talk about that sales and insurance period and dig a little bit deeper. We've been talking about this for a bit here now. Monthly sales, 12 times per year, you have 12 opportunities to buy. Not daily, but also not just once per year as you have with, say, corn, soybeans, wheat, fruit crops. You have once per year to buy in for coverage. Here, you have 12 opportunities per year. Each sales opportunity is for a different insurance period. And each insurance period overlaps with other insurance periods. Now, remember earlier I said, and it's very key here, don't insure the same milk or the same head of swine in the same month in two different insurance periods. How would the company know? Because they're going to get sales receipts from you at the end. We'll get to that point. So let's get into a little bit of detail with dairy sales and rate price publication and with swine sales and rate and price publication, because that's what we're looking for when we're talking about our sales beginning. So our sales period starts when those rates and prices are published to RMA's website on the last business Friday. So not a holiday, not federal holiday, not a different kind of holiday, not a day the market is closed, a sales and business Friday through 8 p.m. Central Time the following calendar day, Saturday. The insurance period begins the month following the sales closing date. So let's look at an example of that. So the insurance period contains for dairy 11 months following the sales closing date. For example, insurance period for the January 29th closing date contains the months of February through December. Coverage begins the second month of an insurance period, so coverage period within that insurance period is March to December. Or if we look at what's upcoming soon, we're looking at the next sales period starting on Friday, May 31st. For that, coverage will begin on June 1st. And the first coverage month is July. Coverage will end. We have to talk about this insurance period here. So that's the start. The end in an insurance period is either the last month of the insurance period in which you have target marketings. So remember we said that an insurance period is either 11 months long or it is 6 months long, depending on if it's dairy or it's swine. And if you only insure in, say, the first 2 months, 2 coverage months, then effectively your insurance period is done after your second coverage month of that insurance period. So that means that you could potentially receive an indemnity before the end of the full insurance period. Another element in the possibility of the earliest of for coverage ending on your insurance period is if something different is specified within the policy or the special provisions of insurance. That is currently not the case. So the third potential of when your coverage may end is if the end date is on a Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday, or for some other reason, the relevant report is not available for the date that your coverage or your insurance period normally would have ended, then your insurance period coverage will end will be based on the most recent report made prior to, not after, but prior to the intended ending date. So you got 3 options. The most likely is going to be the natural ending date for the insurance period listed in the actuarial documents by the risk management agency, or the final coverage month in which you have placed marketing amounts. And here are the sales dates. This handy little chart will be updated. We'll be seeing our 2020 list very shortly. This is included in the actuarial documents published for the public to view on the Risk Management Agency's website. It also is available through Livestock reports, also on the Risk Management Agency website. And as you can see, we've got 2 more sales dates available for both LGM dairy and LGM swine for the 2019 crop year. Next one being Friday, May 31st. Now, there are some situations where there could be no sales or where we could suspend sales, and that can happen at any given time in certain situations. So there could be a case where there's a report or announcement or some event that happens during or after trading hours on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group futures contracts that results in market conditions that are quite significantly different than those that were used to normally rate LGM. In that case, there will not be sales. Nothing's going to be published for you to purchase. There could also be situations where the risk management agency suspends sales. That can happen if events interfere with the functioning of the market. So it could be that there are consecutive limit hits moving up or down and the markets halt. If that happens, sales will be suspended until the market comes back into a normal functioning fluctuation where the market reopens, futures are not trading exorbitantly up or down. So those are 2 times that you could see we'd end up skipping a month of sales. Applications. This is how we start every insurance purchase. We have to fill out an application. And here we also need to be aware of filling out target marketings, which we'll touch on in just a few slides in detail. So the application is for you as the farmer. Keep in mind also that for any crop insurance application, your agent cannot bind coverage under the LGM policy. What's on your application? Your name, address, contact info, tax ID and tax ID type, your SBI holders, that's a separate form for LGM, Your person type, so are you an individual, a spousal, etc., your agent's information, your insurance year, state, whether this is a new application, a correction, a change, a transfer, additional coverage. In other words, a new set of target marketings. We'll look at that again soon. And also there are some certification questions that you need to complete. Speaking of that person type, you can see here highlighted the little section that will list what type of person are you for insurance purposes. So for example, if you sell as an individual and are married, then you would insure as an individual spousal person type. Your crop insurance agent will help you with all these definitions and help you identify what type of person or entity you need to be for insurance. Here you can see that in addition, you are going to need to include your tax identification number for the type of entity you're insuring as. So that would be either a social security number or an employer identification number. And you will need to include for LGM on the application, the spouse's tax ID if you are insuring as a spousal individual policy. The substantial beneficial interest is a little bit different for the livestock gross margin in that it has a separate form that you'll fill out with your crop insurance agent. Here, just like any other policy, you are going to list anyone who has an interest in you as the insured person of at least 10%. And if your person type would normally include an SBI, and you don't include that on your application is not going to be able to be accepted. So please make sure that you're very aware of how you're insuring, that you're insuring in a way that fits how you operate and how you sell your end product, and that you're reporting all applicable substantial beneficial interests. Finally, let's talk a little bit about conservation compliance and the AD 1026 FSA form. Now, this seems a little unusual when we're talking about a policy that covers a gross margin guarantee and is primarily a pricing and futures-based product. However, in particular for the livestock gross margin dairy program, this is a really important key because conservation compliance also dictates whether or not you are eligible for a premium discount on your crop insurance. So you do want to be in compliance with this Farm Bill directed initiative. This came out of the 2014 Farm Bill and remains in place under the 2018 Farm Bill. And it's very important for you as the responsible party to check with your local FSA county office to confirm that your status is firmly in place before the sales closing date for your policy. Here we get into the nitty-gritty, target marketings, or hey, what am I trying to insure, and your coverage. Let's look at all the elements. So we've already mentioned that it's all counties in all 48 states within the contiguous US. Types, dairy cattle has no types that are specified in the actuarial documents. But for swine, we do have those 3 different types of operation, the farrow to finish, feeder pig finishing, and segregated early weaned or SEW pig finishing types. For practices, here we're talking about the 11-month insurance period or 6-month insurance period for either dairy cattle or swine. Couple of examples. A practice might be swine practice 801, That represents the 6-month insurance period of January to June. Dairy Practice 901 represents the 11-month insurance period of January through November. We've been talking here about target marketings, mentioning it here and there. Let's define this thing. Target marketings. First, we have to say insurance periods can overlap. You can buy multiple. In fact, you could purchase every one of the insurance periods in a given crop year. So you could buy every single sales date if you wanted to. The first date you would apply as a new applicant. See the little screenshot on your slide here. In future, you would purchase, checking the box for additional insurance period. How would you do that? Well, first off, you would make sure that you are not overinsuring. You would make sure that you are covering only the amount of milk and only the number of head that adds up over time for any given month to the amount you truly are producing. You don't want to overinsure. You will pay premium, but you will not receive indemnities if you overinsure your marketings. So let's define target marketings. First, let's talk about this report. We'll look at a screenshot of that report on the next 2 slides. The report is submitted by you on our form, and generally it's part of the application form. And it shows for each coverage month, remembering that that's month 2 through the final month of the insurance period. It shows your marketings that you intend for sale that month. Whatever amount you wish to insure. It can be some or it can be all of what you are marketing that month. Your approved target marketings are the maximum amount of milk or swine that can be stated as target marketings on the app. So your approved target marketings are going to be, again, certified by you and are subject to inspection by the insurance company. Your approved marketings are your capacity of your dairy operation for the 11-month insurance period or your swine operation for the 6-month insurance period. Target marketings, that's the smaller element. Target marketings are your determination as to the number of hundredweight of milk or the number of head of swine that you determine you will sell or market and want to insure for each coverage month in the insurance period. For LGM dairy cattle, you're also going to report a target feed amount. That's an input within the limits that are provided by the policy documents. For dairy only, let's look at a few additional little definitions here. Corn or corn equivalent. I mentioned earlier that we talk about this equivalent thing. Let's get into it now. Corn is an amount of energy, and soybean meal is meant to represent an amount of protein. And those are the 2 elements that go into the feed costs, part of your inputs for producing milk, or also applies to the swine for raising them up to a given weight. For dairy, the reason we're defining these specifically for that program is that you have the opportunity under dairy to customize your feed equivalents through a corn equivalent and a soybean or soybean meal equivalent. And there are conversion rates and conversion products that are listed in the commodity exchange endorsement that you and your agent can use to customize and tailor your specific dairy coverage to exactly or closely reflect what you are feeding to make the amount of milk that you are covering. So let's go to the specific target marketings report for dairy. We're going to keep repeating this, but here you are going to tell us, and let's pop up our picture, you are going to tell us the total amount of milk that is intended for sale in a given insurance period. These are your approved marketings. Then you're going to tell us month by month in the coverage period. So you see on here month 2 through 11. So they've skipped that no coverage month of month 1. You will report how many hundredweight of milk you are going to insure based on your productivity. You're going to also report the tons of corn or corn equivalent, and you're going to report the tons of protein meal or a protein equivalent that you are feeding to those dairy cattle in order to get the hundredweight of milk that you are insuring. You're also going to tell for each county that you list what is the deductible that you are choosing. There's a few different deductibles that you have an opportunity to choose from. And here specifically, you are going to choose between $0 per hundredweight and up to $2 per hundredweight in 10-cent increments. And that deductible amount is also going to tell what you are eligible for as a premium discount. And we'll look at that in a few slides in a chart form. Also, there will be conditions of acceptance on the form below this and a signature block. For swine, you're going to indicate, again, let's pop up our picture. You're going to indicate your approved marketings. You are going to indicate your month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6 number of head of swine that are going to be marketed and insured for each of the different types of operation. Now, if you have more than one type of operation, say your farrow to finish and your feeder to finish, that's fine. You can report approved marketings and target marketings by month on the same target marketings form. Fill in the rows for each of those, leave anything else blank, or insert a 0. And particularly when you are dealing with the month 2 through 6 in the target marketings, if you have marketings only in one or a few of those coverage months, please do include a 0 when you are not insuring. That helps to inform your agent and your insurance company that you didn't miss a step. Finally, there is a deductible, excuse me, but there is no associated premium discount with that deductible. Here, though, you will insert either 0 per head or up to $20 per head of swine in $2 increments. And that deductible is going to dictate your premium amount and the amount of coverage you have. Limitations. For the upcoming 2020 crop year, RMA is removing all limitations from the 3 different, yes, there are 3, 2 in Pennsylvania, LGM products. So you can see on the screen here what the limitation is for the remaining 2 sales periods for the 2019 crop year. For LGM dairy, it's 240,000 hundredweight of milk in a given year. And for LGM swine, there was, still is for a short amount of time, a 15,000 head per target marketings contract, or $30,000 per insured producer per year limitation on the product. But for 2020, those restrictions are gone. Again, I must repeat it. Please keep in mind that just because these limitations are going away from a policy perspective, you really don't want to over-insure under these products. You do want to make sure that your marketings, your intention is going to match what you are covering, that you don't over-insure, and that overinsurance can hit you not just insofar as you are outside of a loss, but it could hit you the other way. If you overinsure and you can't produce the amount, um, if you hit less than 75% of your target marketings for a given insurance period, then your loss amount could be impacted. It will be reduced by the percentage by which you fell short. So you want to be as close as is possible in what you say you're going to produce and insure when compared to what you can actually and will actually produce and sell. Important dates. These are always critical to look at, and I hope that you'll all review these with your insurance agent. For the 2019 crop year, which we are getting close to the end of, LGM dairy dates, and here we have an example for the June 2019 through April 2020 insurance period. Some key dates are the cancellation date of June 30th, 2019, a contract change date, which is for your purposes, the date by which the risk management agency had to issue any changes. So that date is already passed. And that's why we know, as we just looked at on the previous slide, that we have changes coming to these policies in the form of lifted restrictions on limitations. The premium billing date for this example insurance period is May 1st of 2020. So that's the first day after the end of the insurance period. The end of insurance, again, April 30th, 2020. And the termination date for this particular insurance period is June 30th of 2020. And at the bottom of our slide, you can see a snippet from the actuarial documents showing a variety, but certainly not all, of the different types and practices for dairy cattle. Additionally, for LGM swine, let's look at example important dates for that program. Here we're looking at the example of June through November 2019 insurance period. Again, our cancellation date is coming up on June 30th of 2019. Contract change date is already passed for making changes for the 2020 year. The premium billing date for this specific insurance period is December 1st of 2019. And the end of insurance is the final day of November 2019. Termination for this particular coverage is the 30th of 2020, June 30th. And again, a little snippet from the actuarial documents. Now here you'll see that we only are looking at farrow to finish type. If you can imagine, because we know there are 3 different types of operations insurable, this list will stretch all the way out for every combination of types or type of operation and practices or insurance periods for all 3 types, all 3 operation types. Let's get ready to do a little bit of math here. Coverage and premium. The calculations that we are going to go through upcoming are going to be pertinent to your gross margin guarantee, and we're going to get into some premium calcs as well. But first, we have some more definitions to look at. So we have a series of expected prices, and later we'll see a series of actual prices. And we have some expected cost or revenue elements. So the LGM coverage related price terms that are noted on this slide are defined in significant detail in the livestock gross margin policy provisions and in the applicable commodity exchange endorsement. And I would ask you to please review all those policy documents carefully and discuss with your agents before purchasing coverage. For those of you who are farmers, these will all make sense, and particularly if you've used futures options in the past or currently, you'll understand what the mechanics are in coming up with these different pricings. A very important point about the LGM product prices, and I mentioned this previously, but they are based on simple averages of applicable Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group futures contract daily settlement prices. The prices are never based on your local market prices or any prices that you might be eligible to receive under a contract or at other market. They are simply based on futures contract pricing. With that noted, for these expected prices, the applicable futures contracts used and the determination of the RMA published prices will depend on whether a given month in an insurance period is a month where a contract expires, a contract is not expired or expiring, or if the month has no futures contract. So depending on that situation, and again, the commodity exchange endorsement document goes into some great examples of this scenario and how to read their contract price charts. Those situations are going to dictate how these prices are arrived at. Also, the expected price measurement period is the 3 trading days prior to and including the last Friday of a month that is a business day on which sales take place. So if we think of the next upcoming sales period, that starts on Friday, May 31st, coming up in just a couple of weeks. So that is the last of the 3 trading days prior to the determination of the expected price. Expected cost of feed. It's important to go through a couple of details with this. So for dairy, the expected cost of feed is going to consider corn, the energy element, or corn equivalents, and soybean meal, or a protein equivalent. There is a policy default measurement for corn and soybean meal, but as we discussed with our target marketing slides, a dairy farmer can use a value that more closely follows his or her feed ration, so you can customize and tailor within the policy limitations. For swine, the expected cost of feed varies based on the type of operation that's insured. And the feed equations that are used are based on an optimal feeding ration equation that was developed through Iowa State University. And that optimal is intended to be a formula that will get hogs up to the sale for slaughter weight of approximately 260 pounds. So for farrow to finish, the expected and actual feed equations are going to use 12 bushels of corn and 138.5 pounds of divided by 2,000 pounds of soybean meal. For feeder pig finishing, the expected and actual will use 9 bushels of corn and 82 pounds divided by 2,000 pounds of soybean meal. And for SEW, or segregated early weaned pig finishing, the expected and actual cost of feed equations use 9.05 bushels of corn and 91 pounds divided by 2,000 pounds of soybean meal. Now, don't worry about hurrying and jotting any of that down. All of this information is readily available in your policy documents. For dairy also, the expected milk revenue is an important element, and that is your expected milk price for a given month in the insurance period times the target marketings, or the amount of hundredweight of milk you intend to sell for that month. Documents, documents, documents. I've mentioned these commodity exchange endorsement documents a few times now, so here I'm going to pop them onto the screen just briefly so you can see that there is a great explanation for here. The livestock gross margin for swine commodity exchange endorsement takes you through what you'll see on the following pages and then leads you through a very detailed example of how to use and how to read and follow along with determination and discovery of the prices for this coverage. And here is the same for the LGM dairy cattle. You'll also see here the swine. So here's the charts that you would read to determine what your closing month is, what your insurance period is, and then for each month within the insurance period, each insurance month, remembering that those are your coverage months 2 through 6 for swine and 2 through 11 for dairy, you'll be able to follow through for your type of operation which months are used for determining your prices. And the same for the LGM dairy. Finally, I've mentioned several times the feed equivalents for dairy. And at the end of the commodity exchange endorsement for dairy, you will find table 2. There are also some examples and calculations included for you to help you better understand how to use this. For if you are feeding some other energy, the corn equivalent, or some other protein, the soybean meal equivalent, and how you might work with those in order to come up with what you'll list as your feed amounts on your target marketings form. Now, where do you find all of this great information? It's all fine and dandy to try to calculate and track all of your own prices, but you don't have to do that. You have full access to not only the actuarial documents where you will find prices and gross margins, but also livestock reports where you will find reports of the amount, the expected and actual amounts, but also some additional bits of information pertaining to livestock. Let's page through. Here for LGM dairy is a snapshot taken earlier this month. I chose Pennsylvania. I chose the dairy cattle. And here in the big cutoff box, you can see actual commodity price for corn, actual commodity price for milk, actual for soybean meal, expected for corn, milk, soybean meal. And you'll notice that at the top here we have March through January insurance period, and we do not yet have any filled in values. Why is that? Because we just completed the first coverage month of April. Those values will get filled in very soon, probably within the next week or so, but they're not there yet. So you'll see an NA as a filler. As months end, you'll be able to come out and see the actual values. You'll always see, once actuarials are published for a year, for a given insurance period, the expected values all the way across for every month. So you can see that on these pages. You'll also see just a little cheat thing. If you look back to our small snapshot on the left-hand side of your slide, you'll see that little cheat sales dates. So that's in a couple different locations for you. Next, this is a snapshot of what you'll see for LGM swine. Now this looks just a little bit different and it probably seems a little odd. Let's page back real quickly. Here you have so much detail for the dairy cattle. You've got milk, you've got corn, you've got soybean meal, all of those different expected and actual values. However, for swine, you've just got an expected gross margin and an actual gross margin. What's up with that? Well, if you remember, dairy cattle lets you really tailor down. And for dairy cattle, you are also reporting your feed amounts. You're reporting tons of corn or corn equivalent. You're reporting tons of soybean meal or soybean meal equivalent in order to hit that amount of milk that you said you were insuring and producing. For swine, you are simply telling for your type of operation how many head. That's it. The other values, the feed cost is that baked in value that is based on the ratio that is optimized from studies done at Iowa State University. So that's why you're going to see a much more simplified view for LGM swine. Now we're getting into the meat here, gross margin definitions. We are over halfway through all of our key policy definitions. And in fact, we're probably 3/4 of the way through our definitions. So hopefully, although there's a lot around this, you're beginning to see that despite the many terms, despite the little nuances, the general concept of ensuring your commodity's market value minus a feed cost and comparing that gross margin guarantee to the actual at the end of your insurance period is not as complex as it might seem on its face. Let's keep breaking this down. Let's go through some components. So for LGM swine, you're going to find the expected gross margin per swine by multiplying the applicable swine price times a yield factor. That yield factor is a set value, a fixed amount of 0.74. Well, what's that for? That is a value used to convert lean hog prices to live hog. So you're multiplying the applicable swine price times that yield factor times the assumed weight at marketing of 2.6 hundredweight or 260 pounds minus the applicable month's expected cost of feed. The specific prices that are used in that calc depend on the type of operation you have. So one of the three types, you're going to have different pricing values that you're going to use in that calc. Also for LGM swine, you're going to find the expected gross margin per month by multiplying the expected gross margin per swine times your target marketings for each month in the insurance period. So how many head? So you've got a per swine times the number of swine gives your expected total gross margin. For dairy, you're going to find an expected gross margin per month by subtracting your expected feed cost. Remember, that is customized to you for a given month in which you have target marketings. You will subtract that from the expected revenue for that month. To arrive at the expected total gross margin for an insurance month, then you are going to take each month's target marketings times the expected gross margin per month for dairy or the expected gross margin per swine for the swine program and add up all those per month results. Very quickly, we touched briefly on the deductible concept earlier when we reviewed information needed on a target marketings report. But let's look at the deductible options a little bit more closely before we dig into our last definition and start in on the math. For LGM dairy cattle, the portion of the expected total gross margin that you elect not to insure is your deductible. Per hundredweight deductible amounts range from $0 all the way up to $2 per hundredweight in 10-cent increments. The total amount of deductible is the selected per hundredweight deductible times the sum of the target marketings across all months in the insurance period. For LGM swine, the deductible is the part of the expected gross margin that you elect not to insure, and the allowable deductible amounts are going to range from $0 all the way up to $20 per swine in $2 per swine increments. With all that said, finally, we get to a gross margin guarantee. And that gross margin guarantee is defined as the expected total gross margin for an insurance period minus your deductible. That's simple. Now, here's the math behind all of that, all of those words. There's some math. You can see on the screen in front of you the formulas for the expected gross margin per month, the expected total gross margin, the deductible, because remember we got to take that into a total dollar and cent amount, and the gross margin guarantee. There's a little note there for the expected gross margin per month. And here we're looking solely at dairy. So remember way back at the beginning, we went through some statistics. And with the fact that dairy is the larger program in Pennsylvania, and the swine calculations in general are similar to the dairy calculations, we're going to keep our time to the allotment that we set out, we're going to focus solely on math with dairy. So that note, the target marketings times the expected milk price for a given month is also called the expected milk revenue. So when you see that definition in your policy documents, and as I've mentioned it previously, it's important to point out that's what that is. So we are using the expected milk revenue in our calculation for the expected gross margin per month. Math, 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 dairy formulas. Here's our scenario. We used for this scenario the RMA or Risk Management Agency Cost Estimator Quick Estimate. And for that estimate, I chose the May 2019 through March 2020 insurance period for dairy. I only put marketings into 1 month in that insurance period. And there I chose the first month of the insurance period that is a coverage month, and that's June. The target marketings were 1,560 hundredweight with a $16.27 expected milk price, corn equivalent of 20.5 tons with a $3.54 expected price, and a soybean meal equivalent of 6 tons with $303.94 expected price. So our expected cost of feed when we consider the corn equivalent and soybean meal equivalent values comes out to $4,415.43. And we chose a 10-cent deductible. Our calculations then are the milk marketings times the expected milk price, so that's our expected milk revenue, minus our expected cost of feed, and that takes us to an expected gross margin. And that is both the expected gross margin per month and the expected total gross margin, because we only have marketings in a single month. So there's no adding for us to do across the different months. Our deductible then is 1,560 hundredweight of milk times the 10-cent deductible for $156. We do our math and we come out with a $20,809.77 gross margin guarantee. Now, as we talked a little bit briefly before, there is a premium discount only for LGM dairy cattle. Now, the premium discount is specific only to you if you have opted to put target marketings in at least 2 months of an insurance period. So if you only have one, we'll back up. As we do in our scenario, guess what? We might have selected a deductible, but we do not receive a premium discount because we did not pool our coverage. And pooling simply means I chose more than one, so I'm grouping multiple hundredweight of milk for multiple months into a single bundled quote unquote option or insurance period. You can see with the deductible selections, if you were to have bundled and be eligible for a discount, what that amount would be. So you see we get to about the middle of our chart and we hit $1 as a selected deductible, and we hit a premium discount of 48%. Your share is 52%. And at $1.10 deductible, we hit 50% premium discount, with your remaining share as a producer being the other 50%. And you'll see that it remains at 50% all the way to the $2 mark. So that is our maximum. Little bit more about premium. You will want to generate quotes using the RMA cost estimator, or much more preferably, use your agent's company policy processing systems quoter. You really want to dig into the different types of situations you could have. So work with your agent to run some different scenarios to determine, if I insure this much milk, what would that do for me? Or in the case of swine, if I insure this many head and maybe I opt to have multiple head in multiple months, what does that look like? What does it cost? What is my coverage? What is the potential benefit to me in my risk management portfolio? Premium rates. One of the reasons that you do want to use the cost estimator or your agent's company policy processing system quoters is that premium rates are not available for a basic hand calculation. You really do need to use an estimator because of the complexities. Premium, we looked at those dates several slides ago. So premium is billed the first business day of the month after the final month of your insurance period in which you have target marketings greater than 0. So what might that mean to you? Now, we know what the actuarial published billing date is, But if you have, as in our example, only a limited number of marketings entered, in our case, we only entered marketings in the first coverage month of the insurance period. At that point, that particular month ends and the actual prices come out, your coverage is in essence done. So your billing and your potential indemnity can occur after that coverage is over. So let's do some more math. Let's do some premium. Here, not surprisingly, because we used the cost estimator to calculate our gross margin guarantee, and we calculated out a system amount. Here's again on the screen our total gross margin guarantee. The system calculated total or gross premium of $347 for our almost $21,000 gross margin guarantee. Premium discount based on the 10% deductible would have been 19%, but what did we do? We only had 1 month of target marketing. So we do not have a 19% premium discount. There may be a nominal $1 balancing discount provided, but in essence, your gross premium technically would be your producer payable premium because there is no discount available. The same thing will happen with swine, where there is never a discount available to you. Let's talk indemnity. So we've gone through our whole process. We've come up with all our expected. We've calculated our gross margin guarantee. We've calculated and potentially been billed for our premium. And now we have actual prices. They are determined very similarly to those of expected values that we calculated previously, except that the futures market contract prices used to arrive at the actual prices will have changed because the markets have moved, the time frame has shifted, and circumstances are different. So we need to look both at the initial insuring values and at the ending actual values. Of particular importance of all of these items on the slide here, we are going to focus down on how we define actual marketings, how we define a notice of probable loss, and how we define marketing report. So, a notice of probable loss. This is very different when compared with, say, corn, soybeans, fruit, even PRF pasture products, where you as a producer usually have some additional involvement in the process of a notice of loss, or a different type of notification is used for losses. Here you are issued documents. You are issued by your insurance company a form called a notice of probable loss, telling you that the insurance company has determined, based on the RMA released prices, actual values for your insurance period, that it appears you may have an indemnity due to you for that insurance period. They'll use your target marketing's values, those actual marketings. That's what's going to go into their math. Once you receive that notice of probable loss, it's going to be accompanied by a marketing report. That marketing report form needs to be completed by you and submitted back to your insurance provider on that form with accompanying documents. So you need to provide sales records. You need to show the actual milk that you sold. You need to show the number of swine that were sold for slaughter. That information is going to be used by your insurance company in a final determination of an indemnity. Your actual marketings are the total amount of milk or total number of swine sold by you each month of the insurance period in which you have proof of sale and in which you provided target marketings, i.e., in which you insured. The actual marketings are used to verify the ownership of the milk or the swine and to determine the approved target marketings. So let's get into some details. So the indemnity is due when that difference between your gross margin guarantee, which we've already calculated, and an actual gross margin for the insurance period is a positive value. And yes, we've already touched on this, but let's go further. Early, quote unquote, indemnities are possible. So what's that about? Well, if we think back to when we talked about the insurance period and when coverage ends, one of those possible earliest end dates is the last month of the insurance period in which you have target marketings. That means that if you only insure target marketings in the first coverage month of an insurance period, much like we did in our example producer situation, then your crop insurance company can consider whether an indemnity may be due once all of the actual prices and the gross margin guarantees are all out for that month. You will not need to wait until the end of the full 11-month or 6-month insurance period. However, here's our caveat that I mentioned earlier. If your total actual marketings are less than 75% of all of your targeted marketings for that insurance period, then your indemnity will be reduced by the percentage of that of which your actual marketings fall short. So don't overdo it on projecting out how much you believe you're going to produce or how many swine you believe you're going to sell for slaughter. Be very realistic, and that may be a good reason that you don't want to include target marketings in the further out months. Perhaps you only want to include marketings in the first few months of a given insurance period, and then later you'll purchase an additional insurance period at a future sales date, and you'll insure additional months of milk or head of swine at that time. That is oftentimes what we do see producers who use these policies do with their operations. Helps them to be able to be more accurate. So again, what's interesting about this particular policy is that duties generally fall primarily, at least with the initiation of the loss, to your insurance company. Your insurance company is going to send you a notice of probable loss about 10 days after the actual gross margins for LGM swine or actual component prices for milk, corn, soy for the dairy program are released by the risk management agency. Once you receive that, you'll fill out the marketing report that comes with the notice of probable loss, and you'll include records and return that to your agent for return to your company within 15 days of receiving the notice of probable loss. Your company is going to go through all that information, they'll settle the claim by subtracting your actual total gross margin from your gross margin guarantee. And if that value turns out positive, then an indemnity will be paid. However, there's a little limitation here. According to policy and procedure for LGM swine and LGM dairy, under no circumstances will any indemnity ever be able to be greater than, so this is a top end limitation, greater than your total target marketings times the 3-day average CME group futures price for your revenue producing product. So either milk for dairy program or the lean hog futures for the swine program. So there's a little bit of a bottom with our 75% ding, and there's a little bit of a top where you can't go over what you are guaranteed. Down to the last few slides, time to do some indemnity math. Not a lot of calculations on this slide, which is very, very interesting. So you see an actual gross margin per month. And for that month, again, since we're dealing with dairy and dairy only in our calcs, we are looking at the actual milk revenue minus the cost of feed. Your actual total gross margin is going to be the sum of all the different months' gross margin per month. And your indemnity is simply your gross margin guarantee minus the actual total gross margin. For our example scenario, again, we're repeating some of our elements that we calculated out previously, except now you'll see we've got some new prices because we have actual prices. So that changes our situation a bit. Again, we still had just the 1 month. So in all actuality, our insurance company would be able to close out our insurance period after the June month price actual values and prices are released. So here we have our same 1,560 hundredweight of milk target marketings with a $13.49 actual milk price. So that price went down. We have a corn equivalent, same amount because that's our expected amount, but a $3.30 actual price. And our soybean meal is down to is up to a $360.55 actual price. So our cost of feed has increased a little bit. We've got a $4,579.37 actual cost of feed. So our inputs went up and our gross margin guarantee remains. So here we go with our math. We've got an actual gross margin, taking our milk times our milk price or our milk revenue, so that's our actual milk revenue minus our feed cost, brings us to an actual gross margin. And here, again, because we only had 1 month of target marketings, that is our actual gross margin per month, and it's also our actual total gross margin. We're going to take our original gross margin guarantee and subtract out our actual gross margin. And that difference, rounded to a whole value, is our indemnity payment. Now, I promised at the very outset that we would look a little bit at what's going on with other dairy coverages. This is a particular item of interest that has been coming about since the 2014 Farm Bill, when the Farm Service Agency Dairy Margin Protection Program, which is now renamed the Dairy Margin Coverage, came into being. In 2014, the Farm Bill blocked dairy farmers from participating in both the FSA Dairy Margin Protection Program and in the Livestock Gross Margin Dairy Cattle Program. 2018 Farm Bill changed things up. So now the 2018 Farm Bill allows a dairy farmer to participate in FSA's dairy margin coverage and to purchase a livestock gross margin dairy cattle policy. That pairing can also be on the same milk. In addition, the 2018 Farm Bill timeframe saw a rollout of a brand new dairy program. There is a webinar that was just recorded this morning on the new dairy revenue protection that came out last fall with an initial coverage period of January through March of 2019. So we're just beginning to see results from that new program. The exciting thing here is that you, as a dairy producer, could potentially use all three of these programs within your operation. There are some restrictions, so you'll want to be careful to not overlap your months of coverage between the LGM dairy cattle crop insurance policy and the dairy revenue protection crop insurance policy. And you'll want to work with your agent to make sure that you're being cautious about that potential overlapping. But suffice it to say, you have a lot of opportunity as a dairy producer to protect your risks in a very tailored fashion. Please take the time to learn about and look into these other options and see how they work with the LGM dairy program to best protect your milk productivity. Finally, let's do a quick recap. What do you need to do? You need to find a livestock crop insurance agent if you don't have one and talk with that person about policy details for livestock gross margin or for swine or for dairy. What are all the options? What is the current year pricing? What are the dates and deadlines? And how can you understand and fit in that policy and that type of coverage with your other risk management tools? You'll also want to talk with your agent to determine which insurance periods may suit your operation and whether you will purchase one or several throughout the crop year. You'll also want to review coverage quotes and determine what best fits your risk management needs. Thank you for being with us for this livestock gross margin for dairy cattle and swine webinar for the state of Pennsylvania. We appreciate your attendance. We appreciate you sharing this training information with others, and we'd love for you to let us know how we did. You'll be receiving a survey tomorrow, and we appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.